All right, folks, it's time for some news. And of course, we're going to see what's going on in the world. Israel is telling the Gazians in parts of the eastern Rafah to evacuate. And definitely, France is warning Israel that forcibly displacing Rafah civilians would be a war crime. And Israel army tells Palestinians, like I said, to evacuate parts of Gaza's Rafah ahead of an expected assault. So they expected to give an assault in that area. And Ukraine, brandy, and EVs top the agenda as Xi meets Macron. So Macron sets trade and Ukraine as top priorities as China's Xi Jinping pays a state visit. So definitely that looks like he's going to a couple of European uh, countries and seeing what's going on in that part of the world. So China's Xi Jinping is visiting Europe for the first time in 5 years. His goodwill tour apparently by some people is thought will be an uphill battle, and all along those lines. And floods in southern Brazil killed at least 75 people over 7 days. So there was Brazil flooding that was going on, and thousands have been evacuated, and all in that space. So definitely that is something that is going on. And I understand we might be having some severe weather. I doubt it'll be anything like that, but that might be coming in our North Carolina way and all along that way. And Netanyahu is calling suggestions that he torpedoed Cairo hostage truce talks a complete lie. He's saying that is a complete lie. And definitely the Hamas spokesman are saying that the terror group will continue truce hostage deal talks despite the Rafah evacuation. And the CIA chief is headed to Qatar for emergency meeting on Gaza talks. That's according to some sources in the government. And unloved but unchallenged, Sunak appears safe because it looks like a lot of people are saying that nobody would want his job in the first place. So Russia's Sunak's hung parliament claims are unreliable, according to Sir John Curtis. And Russia Sunak admits the Tories may not win the general election and claims that the UK is heading for a hung parliament. So that's something that we're seeing as well. And displaced teachers are setting up tent schools in Rafah as that Israel assault looms. So that's something else that we're seeing in the news as well. And Russia to hold drills on tactical nuclear weapons in new tension with the West. So Russia will be holding the battlefield nuclear drills after the Macron and Cameron comments. So they announced that nuclear weapon drills after what they said were provocative Western threats. And definitely looks like a drone has exploded in northern Israel. IDF has named a fourth soldier killed in Gaza border rocket barrage. So there's definitely a lot of these conflicts that are still going on in the world as the Israel police raided Al Jazeera and the network is off the air in Israel. Israel has ordered a shutdown of Al Jazeera in the country, seized the equipment, and what some people are saying is a dark day for democracy. So we'll see how other folks have to say about that as well. And it looks like a last minute candidate, Jose Raul Malano, won the Panama presidential elections. So, yes, there are presidential elections all over the world. And apparently, a last minute candidate is who won it there in Panama. I wonder if we can get a last minute candidate in the United States. That would be interesting to see. And they were able to pull off a win or something like that. And in the African country of Chad, they are having presidential elections as well. So there is a vote set to end military rule, and opposition cries foul over dynastic dictatorship as Chad goes to the polls. So Chad's president looks to shore up his regime as he seeks a new alliance. So yes, there are elections going on in Chad, and apparently there's an Orban challenger in Hungary that has mobilized thousands at demonstrations. So apparently, Viktor Orban's challenger told a large rural rally that Hungary is tired of the ruling elite. So it looks like he might be getting some challenges as well. So it looks like there are challenges going out throughout the world and all in that space. And as China and Iran hunt for dissidents in the U.S., the FBI is racing to counter the threat. So maybe they're hunting for some dissidents that are right here in our country as well. And the U.S. and the Philippines have forced a staged combat drills near strategic channel off of southern Taiwan. So there's all kinds of things going on in that space. And Sasha will be interested, but Canada has Canadians have arrest highlight alleged gang role in the India's intelligence operation. So India is calling Canada arrest over the Sikh activist murder political compulsion. So they have apparently made 3 arrests in the Sikh separatist land that sparked a spat with India. So there's a spat going on between India and Canada as well. And anger mounts as Kenyans are left homeless and searching for loved ones that was going on with their flooding that was taking part in their world as well. And Ukraine marked its 3rd Easter at war. That's right. Easter was taking place. So Ukraine and Russia marked Orthodox Easter under the shadow of the war. As a matter of fact, my neighbors are from Ethiopia, and I know that they were celebrating Passover yesterday as well. As a matter of fact, they gave me a little bit of their food they prepared, and so that was fun. And they have dived into it, and I might dive into more of it later on as well. But yeah, they are from, I believe, both Ethiopia and Eritrea is where the family lived at, and we don't know that that has been an area in conflict as well. And Colombia has canceled its university-wide commencement ceremony. So after weeks of protests, Colombia has canceled its main commencement ceremony, and it looks like protests against the Israel war in Gaza are rattling colleges across the U.S. And a Jewish UCLA group condemns violence of pro-Israel fringe protesters. So definitely that's something going on as well. And UCLA has created a high-level post to oversee campus safety after security lapses in the mob attack. And police appear to have fired rubber bullets at UCLA protesters. And the hush money trial is still going on as well. So for the jury in Trump's hush money trial, evidence of a criminal conspiracy is what folks, I guess, are looking for, and all along those lines. So definitely looks like New York versus Trump will resume Monday after an eventful 3rd week of testimony and thousands of dollars of gag order fines. So we'll see if there's any more of that that goes on in this particular week as well. And an abducted 10-month-old was found alive after 2 women were killed and a girl was critically injured in New Mexico. So a missing New Mexico infant has been found, and a suspect in her disappearance is in custody, according to the FBI. So that is good that they did find that missing young person and all along those lines. And in Texas floods, hundreds are awaiting rescue after heavy rains pummeled the Houston area. So there were heavy rains there. And like I said, we may be getting some heavy rains as well. And a man was arrested after attempting to shoot a pastor during a ceremony at a Pennsylvania church. So a man aims a gun at a pastor doing church service, and that was in North Braddock, that part of Pennsylvania. And the gunman was arrested after trying to shoot the Pennsylvania pastor during church sermon in a wild caught on camera moment, and all along those lines. And Mexican authorities are revealing a bizarre reason they believe Americans were murdered on surfing vacations, and Mexicans are protesting and paying tribute to the murdered foreign surfers. So definitely that's something else going on as well. So definitely a lot of things going on in the world and all along those lines. So definitely getting ready to bring up my other folks, see what they've got going on as well. I know I've got Rick Rosner. Hey, I've even got Shaquille with me, and Shaquille's over there in Australia. And of course, I've got Dan Worthington, and we've got Jatovi, and I've actually got a meeting going on as well. So I might turn it over to Nick for a second, as well as to Rick. But that was just some of the news going on. I know Australia's been all up in the news, Shaquille, with all the things that have been going on. So if you've got any reports on those things that are taking place and all along those lines, then we would love to hear from you and what's happening in Australia. And maybe Rick's got some thoughts about the elections and what's happening with the trial and everything. But glad to see that you were here and all along those lines. And like I said, I have a meeting on my other job as well, so I might be popping off for a second, but Nick can handle the hosting for a second while I take care of that, and then I'll be back.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I don't know anything about what's going on in Australia because I don't follow it. Hey, Shaquille, I'm moving to Europe in August the 1st. So I'll be living in Barcelona, in case you didn't know.
Oh, I didn't know, but you'll see more of me then if you're going to be in Barcelona because I'm.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in London, I'll just flip over to London. You know, it's like
I'd rather come to Barcelona. I'd rather come to Barcelona than go to London. I mean, The weather in the UK is not exactly exciting.
Oh,
I mean,
the weather in Ukraine sucks.
If anybody ever wonders why the British, went out all over the world looking for other land, it wasn't because of their colonial ambitions. It was simply because they were trying to find somewhere with better weather than the UK. That was all it was.
Oh, I know that. I mean, we looked all over Europe, and the thing is, we decided on Barcelona because it's the weather. And even Valencia, people go, "Oh, you go to Valencia, too hot." Seville is too hot. Italy is too crowded. I mean, it was all these different things. The French are too crazy.
Barcelona is lovely. Obviously, I spent a lot of time on the French Riviera and down in Monaco, and better taxes down there as well in Monaco. But Switzerland, although it's not quite as good as far as weather's concerned, Switzerland's obviously where I'm based because of the business that I'm in. But Barcelona is absolutely fantastic, so I think you'll very much enjoy it there.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to load up on euros because I'm afraid the dollar's going to collapse. And the thing is, the real problem is, where do you go to load up? Are these brokers real, or Memorex are going to steal their money? So we're having a lot of conversations about transferring dollar streams.
Well, look, I think for the US, Jatovi is going to be like, what's going on with Shaquille these days? The thing with the US dollar is that actually Joe Biden's policies it appears, have helped the US dollar. It has helped the economy weather what has happened so far. The question is going to be how long that's going to be sustainable. But based on the current growth trajectories that are estimated, I wouldn't be so quick to write off the US dollar. I think that under Joe Biden's administration, the economy has grown. We can argue that maybe it would have grown by more under Trump. That's a different argument, but it certainly has grown. And I think that it will continue to grow. And I think the US will continue to have some strength. The real question is whether the euro is actually going to experience that strength. And at the moment, we've seen the Italian bonds fall, the spread between the Italian bonds and the German bonds fall to the lowest levels that we've seen in over a decade. So, there's a few issues brewing in Europe that I think Europe's more fragile than the US is at the moment.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, the thing is, right now I'm still in the US dollars, but I notice if it swings, like I can make or lose like $4,000 a day on a penny swing or some garbage like that. I'm going, I made $4,000 because so it's just really, really weird when you do a lot of the foreign currencies. I don't. And so
what's the story that you've applied for and received a golden visa to Spain? Is that
no? I'm getting what they call a non-lucrative visa. I talked to our immigration attorney. He said that's probably the best one for me because I don't kind of work. So they go, well, you get and then you have to go through all these apostles and stuff. I got a visa to go to Russia. It's a pain in the neck because you got to interview and all this other garbage. But it'll give me ability to be over there and over here. I got to come back here too. So
the problem that Americans have when they go abroad is that the US tax system is unique in that it taxes American citizens based on their citizenship, whereas almost every other country on earth has a combination of territorial and residence-based taxation. So they will say things like, if you live here, then you have to pay tax on your worldwide income. And even if you don't live here, you have to pay tax on the income that you've derived from this country, which I think is reasonably fair. With the US, I'm surprised that they don't have a cap. If you're going to tax foreign citizens, I think there should be a cap on the amount of tax that they have to pay or the amount of income, although your double taxation treaties step in. But just lastly, I'll just very quickly say, I think the US would actually benefit, as would every other country, from some type of retirement visa. You have a lot of people that travel from the US down to South American countries, from Australia into the Asian countries, etc. And what they're doing is they're saying, well, my retirement dollars are going to take me a lot further in these other countries. But there's a lot of people that are very wealthy and even people that actually aren't that wealthy that would like to be able to travel to the United States. And I was just recently meeting with some people that have what you call RVs, those motorhome type things. Right. And they've traveled all around Australia. And a lot of them have said, I'd love to go to the United States and just travel around for 2 or 3 years. There isn't actually a visa that allows them to do that. If you're 70 years old, retired, you've got a few $100,000 spare capital after you've paid off your house and everything, there isn't actually a visa that would allow you to go to the United States and travel around. You're not working. You're not taking any money off anybody. And
Right.
I'm not sure why. I think that if the US was going to do something to attract foreign money into their country, that would be an obvious one.
Yeah, they should. We have a horrible immigration. Rick, yeah.
Yeah, most for U.S. people going overseas and a lot of other countries, the most you can go, longest you can go is about 6 months, and then you have to go home for 6 months, which is a pain in the butt. But about taxes, the U.S. does have a good deal for people making fairly normal incomes overseas. It's called the Foreign Earned Income Credit, and you don't have to pay taxes on about the first $110,000 you're paid working overseas if you're a full-on expert.
But
That's if you're working overseas. I'm not working.
With vacations coming into, I was just going to say, with vacations coming, because my in-laws come from Canada all the time and they stay 6 months in Florida. So it's roughly about the same thing. I think the Canadian, they can only stay 6 months. If they go past that 6 months, they lose their health care. So I think other countries do similar.
Yeah, a lot of countries do, Javi, and I guess what I'm saying is that I think that Western countries should be a little bit more flexible. I believe it's the same thing if an American wanted to come to Australia and take an RV and travel around Australia for 2 years. There isn't really a visa that allows them to do that. Back to what you were saying, Rick, look, $120,000, I'm not trying to suggest that that's nothing. For a lot of people, that's a lot of money. I think, though, that there's a lot of people that go overseas who have the capacity to earn substantially more than that. And one example, though, is that if you purchase a property in overseas and you've borrowed the money to do that, and that property has then appreciated in value, you might, in that single year, exceed that $120,000 threshold. Also, if you're a younger person, and something that I actually would encourage a lot of young people to do is to travel, especially outside of their own home country, you might be lucky enough to get yourself a job on one of the yachts or one of the shipping companies. Now, in a lot of those cases, your income is actually tax-free, but it's not tax-free if you're an American citizen. And it's very, very easy for those people to earn $10,000 or $15,000 a month while they're away. And if they're any good, well, then they might start working for private yachts. I've only got the experience in Monaco where people can earn $15,000 and $20,000 a month. All of a sudden, they're being subject to taxes in a country that they're not currently in. I think from a fairness, that doesn't seem right. But hey, that's
where Rick says you have the earned income exclusion. But then the thing is, it goes away after a while, and you have to pay. But what I found out in Spain is the taxes are much harder than they are here in the U.S. In other words, they have a pretty stiff income tax rate over there, Shaquille.
Well,
so it's something I have to be real careful about.
But the difference is that you can, as an expat, which again is something that I find just fascinating when we look at international tax codes, is that as an expat, you're often exempt from those taxes. And this is not just Spain, by the way. This is also the same if somebody like myself was to come to the United States on a business visa that allowed me to live there, but didn't allow me to work there, just allowed me to live there. I could only work in my own business. If I was on that type of visa, I would be essentially exempt from all other US taxation or from most other types of personal income taxation in the United States. Most countries do that. What I would say is if it's such a good idea to do that for foreigners in order to attract them to come into your country, surely it's a good idea to let people in your country take advantage of the same types of schemes.
Right.
But no country I know of, Australia, Canada, etc., no country I know of does that. All countries seem to have these preferential things to attract foreigners, but nothing preferential to keep people in the country, keep their money in.
The big Western countries have a lot of inertia. It's the little teeny countries like Estonia that are more nimble. You can become an e-citizen of Estonia. I don't know exactly what that entails, but you don't have to live in Estonia, but you can get some kind of electronic citizenship if you're doing if your business is online, which seems like a really modern way to be.
I think
I agree with you.
In Estonia has been phenomenal for them. What you're noticing is that those poorer European Union countries don't have an awful lot that they can actually compete on, right? So they can't compete with legacy countries in relation to high-paying jobs. They can't compete with the UK, although the UK has now left. You can't compete with the UK, France, and Germany with those high-paying jobs. What do you do? Well, you can try to employ manufacturing, which is a bit cheaper. One of the issues that you have, of course, is if you're in the European Union, by and large, you don't have any control over your currency. So if you're a country like Greece, you can't just drop your currency in value so that you can export more and let your economy recover. So that's become a bit of a problem. So some of those countries, what they've done is they've looked at making it easier for people to come in. They've looked at reducing taxes, and they've also looked at trying to make sure that businesses find it easier to domicile themselves there. Not just, by the way, those small and somewhat poorer countries like the Eastern European countries. You also see that in a country like Sweden. Sweden has a relatively low corporate tax rate. Whilst there is a lot of regulations there, and you guys have heard me say this before, the governments over there will actually be very proactive in making sure that you're able to comply. So instead of it being we're going to send prosecutors after you to see if we can catch you out on something, and then we're just going to nail your ass to the wall. Instead of doing that, they're like, okay, look, there is a regulation here that you aren't quite meeting. Let's help you to meet that regulation. Or if it's a regulation that you can't easily meet without causing all these other problems, we will actually go back to the government and say, hey, actually, this regulation is having an unintended consequence. I'm not trying to say that Sweden's perfect, but that's what we're seeing in those smaller countries that are trying to be more competitive.
Plus, if you get citizens, if you live in like any EU country, you're a 2-hour flight from any other EU country, which is freaking great because Europe is great. Also, if you move to Sweden and you're darker, if you're like Jewish or whatever, like if they're all blonde over there, and they don't think it's a big deal. But if you go over there and I've been told you're darker complexioned, they kind of love you. And you get to, if I'm way past the years of hooking up with people, but I've heard Sweden is good for darker skinned people hooking up with you, like if you want
as the only person here who's single, I thank you for the relationship advice there, Rick. And I am rather partial to blondes. So
now we know the country you should go to, Shaquille. You should go to
that's
Sweden.
Right. No, I've spent
your
time
blonde bombshell spouse.
The Swedes, the Norwegians, the Finnish, most of Scandinavia. As I said, I very much like Switzerland. I think is sort of really central to everything, and I just like being that part of the world. So
yeah, I'm trying to get my grandson to go to school at ETH University in Zurich. So I'm going to work on him to go to school over there. A lot of people in the United States don't know ETH, but it is a top 50 world school that Albert Einstein is the noted alumni for, because over here, all you hear is U.S. schools. You don't hear anything about what goes on. Because over here, as you know, Shaquille, it's the United States of America and no one else exists, except for
I think that parents, especially after COVID, a lot of parents have lost a little bit of faith in the school system. We've seen that around the Western world. But I'm actually quite
an expensive.
I'm quite an advocate of
$1,200 a year.
I'm quite an advocate of a program called the International Baccalaureate Program. So that's a program that is an alternative to, I'm not sure what year you guys go up to. Is it year 12 for high school? I'm not sure. But it's an alternative to finishing high school and getting a diploma, as you guys get, or over here in Australia, they get the HSC, New South Wales, whatever the qualification is. An International Baccalaureate Program tends to have, there's two streams to it, but it tends to, I think, have a more international focus. I think it sets students up to be able to study in a multitude of different locations if they so choose. So I think that's actually preferable to just taking a child out of school and homeschooling them based on the current curriculum. If you're not happy with the current curriculum, perhaps you should look at alternatives.
Yeah, well, the real problem is the universities in the United States are just basically overpriced. Seriously, ETH University, $1,200 a year in tuition. It's one of the top 50 in the world, but you go through all the European universities, they're relatively inexpensive. When you go to the United States, they're relatively way overpriced and way oversubscribed. People spend way too much money. And then the worst thing, they go into student debt to get that. So not only you're overpaying, you're going in debt to pay for these universities.
I would actually argue the opposite, though, Nick. I would say that if that's the problem, sorry, Rick, I'll just quickly say this so you can respond. If the problem is what you're saying, that it's oversubscribed and students in America are getting into student debt, then obviously those universities are underpriced. They should be charging more.
No, but you see what happens is that they made it too easy to get student loans. So when you have an idiot buyer, okay? The idiot buyer, all I have to do is sign a piece of paper and you're in, not realizing they just created themselves to be an indentured servant for many, many years.
Exactly. So therefore,
what happens, it's the biggest con game in America.
The cost
is universities.
The cost should be higher, firstly, and secondly, those private lenders that are lending students that money,
government lending,
they should be required to not rely on the government to guarantee those loans. So then you have less bad loans going out there. So the taxpayer is
there you go.
For courses that don't lead to worthwhile and productive jobs.
Hold it. Different story. Yeah, Rick.
On the one hand, you have the student loan game, which is bad because the lenders are predatory often and incompetent. And just like there's not a lot of accountability with the lenders. But there's another game to play, which is if you've got a kid who qualifies for admission to an elite university, if you make less than 150 grand, that kid can often get a full ride. And so if you've got middle class parents, you can maybe squeeze in under 150. And there are some parents who are kind of on the ball who look at shifting assets and seeing how they.
Yeah, I mean that is so discriminatory toward the rich. I can't stand it. I mean, the thing is, what they're saying is that if you have a lot of money in the United States, screw you. Okay, instead we're going to take some pauper kid and stick him in for a full ride. And you know, I say to those universities, screw you. We're going to go.
Okay, so that's all true, but I assume
why do you discriminate against the rich people? The hardworking rich Americans like myself are discriminated because we're going to bring some poor pauper in to take their place.
Yeah, but the people listening to this show, not everybody listening to this show makes over 150 grand.
A lot of people that listen to the show do make over 100.
Yeah, but the people who don't should know that if
they don't listen to the
make
show,
less than that, you've got some resources for going to good college.
Yeah, that's exactly the reason.
You don't.
Why.
You think,
and that's exactly the reason why.
Making over 150,000 doesn't mean you have resources to spend 90,000 on tuition. I'm sorry.
Rick, that's exactly the reason why the cost of tertiary education in the United States is gone up so dramatically, because you are allowing people who don't have the resources to go to these schools to go to them. And let's be honest as well. We're not talking about the cost of education being that high in the United States. It's not that high, right, compared to everywhere else. What we're talking about is the cost of going to Stanford or to Harvard or to Princeton or to Yale or to University of Southern California, UCLA. Those universities, they're really expensive. How much does it go? How much does it cost to go to what's the university up there, BYU, down in Utah?
BYU is cheap.
Go there compared to going to.
You can go to a state school probably for 10 grand a year. Oxford is $12,000 a year. A private school like USC is $83,000 a year plus room and board. But yeah, state school, you can probably find a state school that you can go to for less than 10 grand. Also, if you want to go to the South, some states will give you full rides if you come from out of state, because they want to get talent. They want to recruit talent.
Just a quick question.
While we're talking about the $83,000 for USC, let me just say, go the Trojans. I accidentally put a bet on them the other day. I didn't know who they were. So go the Trojans. I'm in love with USC now.
So what we're talking about is creating a two-tier educational system. Because if we're talking about not complaining so much that those without should not be going to the colleges that they cannot afford, which are pretty much all colleges, because the college experience and the expense is so unaffordable these days, and it only keeps rising. So if we're saying that that those without should not go to these colleges, then we're creating a two-tier system, because those colleges that have that rich that are extremely, affluent, rich, and all this other stuff, that, the ones that Nick is talking about, that is so discriminatory to afford to give to those without, aren't we creating a two-tier system of education to where those with can get education and those without cannot?
Totovi, if that may well be the truth, that may well be how it plays out.
So
but
if we're going to,
so maybe finish responding to you. So the solution to you then should be the same solution you have when you want to take away school choice for parents in the United States in primary and secondary school. Okay,
No.
because what you already have in the United States, as well as Canada and Australia and every other Western country, is a situation where students can go to publicly funded secondary schools or primary schools, okay, and not get the same level of education on average as they would get if they were from a wealthier family and they went to a private school or a private college. So this is already the situation. And what's the solution? The solution isn't, according to your side of politics, the solution isn't to give every student a grant to go to private school. The solution, according to you, is to make sure that all the rich kids have to go to public schools and they don't have school choice programs, etc. So why not do the same thing with universities? Tell all the Ivy League schools that you can't exist anymore. You can only charge as much as a community college if that's the issue that you have.
So that is nothing of what I said, and you went to a hyperbole to try and pigeonhole me into an answer. So let me explain what I'm talking about, because you agreed initially from the start. That's why I tried to interject and keep going. As you said, it would create a two-tier justice system as it played out, as we're just talking about. So the solution, is what Rick is talking about, to be able to, help those without to be able to get into these institutions so we can have an equal playing field. In terms of the K through 12 system, it's not a matter of removing school choice and all this other stuff. No, right now we're at a situation where your school choice option is also creating that two-tier system, because they're not funding the public schools that are in the closest neighborhoods to those individuals where the people live. So therefore, people are trying to get into these really nice schools because they're not funding what's right beside them, which they can go to. So you have a problem within the public school system where there's a lack of funding across the board to be able to give an equal education to all those students, which is the majority of students.
Well, I don't think that's true, Jacoby, but even if it were, the fact of the matter is that we do not live in an economically equal society. No society has ever been created where that has been the situation. And parents with more financial resources are able to give their children better opportunities. That's just the way it is. And just on that, though, I didn't come from a wealthy family. I've been all over the world. Nobody has ever asked me, Shaquille, where did you get your undergraduate degree? And then I've said, whatever university, and they've gone, oh, well, that's a shit university. You're obviously not qualified. That doesn't happen. The reason that these kids want to go to Ivy League schools is because they want to be able to network with other people who they think are going to be able to go somewhere, and because they think there is some level of prestige. And I can tell you now that after 10 or 20 or 30 years, the prestigiousness of where you got your degree really doesn't count for very much in the job market.
I will retort after Rick. Rick has had his hand up for a while.
I would guess, Australia started off in its colonial history as being like a dumping ground for prisoners. But I assume that Australia's success as a nation has been in large part due to you guys pulled yourself up by your bootstraps and created a great educational. I assume education in Australia is pretty freaking good for everybody, right?
Debatably, yeah.
All right, so
it's better than yours. It's better than yours, but it's not hard.
All right, so we've been talking all this time about how education, the implication is that it's a private benefit to help people but we haven't been talking much about how having a very educated population is a benefit for the whole country, and which the U.S. benefited from. I say this all the time. We freaked out after Sputnik in 1957 and said we have to get everybody educated, and having a country we need to. I want to have everybody freaking educated in the U.S. Especially,
I think that's a terrible.
So let me retort real quick.
Hold on, wait. Oh. I want STEM education available to most people who want it, because that's a way to maintain technological superiority.
And I completely agree, Rick. And to retort back to Shaq, because that's actually where I was going. So Shaq, nobody has argued that we need everybody to have the same amount of money. So let's move that off the table. We all understand that if you are affluent, if you have money, like individuals like yourself and Nick, you have money, you can afford things that others cannot. Nobody's arguing against that. Nobody's arguing against that. Oh, well, Bill Gates should be able to pay for stuff for his family that others shouldn't. Nobody's arguing that. The argument is in what we're talking about is what Rick is actually alluding to right there is the investments in education. When we're talking about private entities and private schools and all this stuff and school choice, again, if we do not have, for example, we talked weeks back about the education system and about how we have to bus kids from other neighborhoods to get to other schools because they cannot go. They don't want to go to the school next to them. Why? Because it doesn't have the same funding as these other schools. The reason it doesn't is because they're private entities and charter schools that have taken that money away. If we were to have an equal playing field in terms of just a base level, which we do not, if we have a base level at the schools, that still does not take away from the private entities or the private schools that get extra funding.
You're contradicting yourself.
That we need.
He doesn't know what he's talking
about. I'm going to finish.
Okay.
So again, we need a base level where schools have air conditioning units. That's a base level. There are schools within Durham that do not have air conditioning units within their facilities. There are schools within Durham that do not have heating units within their facilities.
Are you serious?
Yes, I'm very serious. You can attest to it. So again, the point being, we need to have a base level set in these public schools to where it actually it allows for kids to learn in their best surrounding. Yes, you can have the extra stuff. Nobody's complaining about that. The problem is we are not even on a base level equal playing field. And the investments in education, which Rick is talking about, yes, education has the best payback out of any investment that we do because everything that we've done comes from education, from the NASA stuff.
Okay, let me respond.
Everything that we're working on a computer.
Jacoby, I had a quick question for you based on something that Shaquille said earlier. If I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, didn't we actually go here in Durham, and I know this is an international show, to the International Baccalaureate model? Because it seems to me that I remember that there's an International Baccalaureate school here in the area. Am I
there's a number of schools. There's a number of schools in the area.
Am I incorrect in thinking that?
There are a number of schools in the United States that offer it.
So I was corrected. We have gone in that model as well.
Yeah, there are a number of schools, including in North Carolina. Now, let me just come and say, you say that there needs to be some equality at a base level. There is equality at a base level. You just want there to be more funding. No, hang on.
There isn't.
Hang on.
No, Shaq. You cannot start off with a false narrative. I'm not going to let you do that. There is no base level. That's what I'm telling you. There isn't.
Show me the school that doesn't have.
Well, let me respond to you, Jacoby. There is a certain base level. What you're complaining about is that the base level in public education is too low. And you know what? I'm not an expert on the education system in Durham, but I can certainly tell you that for most public schools around the Western world that I've observed, you're probably quite correct, actually, that there should be more funding for publicly funded schools. Absolutely, I agree with you. But the idea that there should be a level of equality with the private schools, which are funded in part by the parents' private tuition fees.
I didn't say that.
I think that's a nonsense. The other thing I just
want to say, you're arguing against something I didn't say.
Okay, great, Jacoby. You didn't say.
So
Rick, I just want to come back to something that you said. You said that STEM subjects should be available
to shuffle papers. They've already done studies on this. 75% of the new funding, we need more money, goes to hire an administrator, shuffle more papers. Then they hire a secretary 3. Then they hire a secretary 4. It doesn't help the kids at all. And you're not going to see more.
And private schools tend to have. And private schools tend to have. And private schools tend to have less administrative costs.
Exactly.
And more money going straight to the students. But Rick, I want to come back to something that you said. you talked about STEM subjects and education being really important, and that STEM subjects should be available to everybody. Well, I would say that every subject that has some sort of tertiary value should be available to students. But the thing is, they are. Again, I don't want to repeat myself, but there's a big the difference is that people want to go to STEM subjects at Harvard or USC or something. They don't want to go and do a medical degree at the local community college. So these subjects are available, and there are different pathways that most countries provide for their students to be able to get into it. That's not what we're talking about here, though. What we're talking about is that the average person saying it's unfair because the very wealthy are able to send their students to schools that have much nicer facilities, much nicer grounds, that have afforded to, much more experienced professors and that sort of thing.
That's because we work our
Nobody's
butts
arguing
off
that,
to
Jack.
That's the reason.
I want to mention post-grad education. In the U.S. and I think around the world, if you want to get a PhD, that is usually funded by the university. You come to the university, not law or medicine, getting a doc. But if you want to get a PhD, you go to the university and you say, I want to study this. Here are my grades, my test scores, and they fund you for your PhD, because what you're doing is also a benefit to the university, because you're going to do research that establishes the university as a place that does good stuff.
Also, to point out that even high schools currently are starting to move towards specialized education, even in the public school system. For example, there's actually a local school here that focuses kids on medicine, and it actually puts kids in actual local community colleges as well. And local community colleges have continuing ed and so on and so forth that actually allow you to get into these positions of medicine. So to disagree with you, that Shaq, yes, community colleges are pushing that as well. So there is an educational push. We all agree that the administrative costs and all the other stuff, that's a problem, but that's a law problem that we can solve through laws. But we don't.
No, it's a funding problem. You want to take my tax dollars. You want to take my tax dollars. Although I'm not talking about this specifically in America, you want to take my tax dollars and you want to piss them up against the wall with administrators, and then I've got no right to say, hang on a second. You say it's a law problem. But it's a law problem as well for you to pass a new law that increases the tax burden on me.
All the laws, because we're set up in. That's what the public school system is. It is.
Hold on a second, Shaquille and Jacoby. I saw that Dan had made some points in the comments and everything about the formula there in Utah and everything. So, Dan, if you want to just share a little bit of that with us and everything, because I do know that a lot of times there are things that are done in terms of the way that states allocate their funding and everything. So you had brought some comments on.
You have to understand most states are different. They have different formularies, and so it's up to the state to decide how education is funded. And if you do the research and study the state offices of education in most states, they eat up more than 50% of the educational budget. Why? Hell, I don't know. It's a waste, right? Most of it's compliance stuff they have to pay administrators to do. But typically states use a formula funding based on head count. If a child has special needs, typically they get a higher prorated dollar for that. In Utah, they do. I don't know. It's like in North Carolina or anywhere else. And so most of the funding formulas around the country are based on the number of students that sit in the seats or attend. They're penalized if the kids don't show up, that kind of thing. And that is a big problem more and more. I think who pointed that out? I think Lee did. In New York schools, they have a high degree of low attendance in those schools. And so to some extent, the schools kind of create their own problems, right? Because if they're not appealing to the parents and the children in those areas, and they end to send them to private schools, or even like you said, Jacoby, charter schools, which the reason charter schools exist is because the public schools are not competitive. They don't provide the curriculum that the parents want their children to have. Typically, the charter schools are specialized, right? And but you have to actually apply for those and get in, and that's competitive. So, I mean, that's my experience in educational funding The whole equity issue is interesting to talk about. There have been a number of Supreme Court cases on this topic. It's like wealth in society is there's a guarantee of opportunity under the law, not necessarily a guarantee of results of equality.
Hey Dan, and along those same lines, and this is for everybody here on the panel, because as y'all know, one of the things, and that's actually what the background noise that y'all heard in the background was, and everything is how much of the funding is a problem because we have gone so much into this Common Core methodology and everything. Because a lot of states are wanting to do the testing where they are wanting you to have a certain kind of framework, and a lot of them are doing Common Core. I saw you shaking your head, Shaquille, but I mean that's one of the companies I work for. They're grading literally the Common Core test and everything. So what are your thoughts around Common Core? And I know that they've tried to introduce it in places like Australia and the other parts of the world as well. So what are your thoughts around?
Of course we did, because we here in Australia are run by morons who look at the United States and go, right, what are the good things about America? Freedom of speech, Bill of Rights. Right, those are fantastic things. We want none of that. What are the things in America that aren't working? What has been terrible? Common Core didn't work. Awful. Yep. Sign us up. We'll take it. I mean, this country is run by morons, and unfortunately, we are not the only country that has that problem.
Are you talking about Australia or the United States?
Yes, I'm talking about Australia. I'm a lot more polite when I talk about your
Common
country.
Core was obsolete the day it was signed. I mean, technology moves so fast. And what we're going to do, and I know Bill Gates was behind this. This is one of the few things I disagree with Bill Gates about. We're going to learn.
He was. I mean, he was one of the ideologues.
Let me tell you.
Taught in the 1800s.
Let me tell you, if you want to have
technology has left Common Core.
If you're in high school today and you want to have a high-paying job in the Western world, and you want to actually know where there is a shortage, most of the time those shortages are in trade subjects. That's where all the shortages are. There's been an oversubscription of students going into university, and Rick, just to come to something that you and to Toby, where's the fairness in that? If you're prepared to have the government subsidize university students, why not give a similar level of funding to those people that actually want to go get a trade?
I totally agree with that.
They're already doing that.
Just to come to something you said, Rick.
So I'm not fighting with you on that. That's
no. Hang on. I wanted to say something to you before. You made a comment before about PhD students often being funded by the universities. That's true here in Australia as well. That I think is actually the government that just funds it. If you're doing a PhD, it's covered by them. One of the concerns that I have is that we're seeing a lot of kids that come out of high school at 16, 17, 18. They go straight through. They do an undergraduate degree with honours, so that skips them through their masters, and then they go and do their PhD. They come out at 24, 25 with a PhD. Hey, that's fantastic in some cases. But if you're not going to be working in academics, oftentimes those sorts of qualifications are necessary. And then you're looking at somebody who's 25 who's got a PhD, and you're trying to employ them to be a bank teller. It doesn't make sense. I think for a lot of kids, they should stop once they've got their undergraduate or sometimes their postgraduate, which is a 4-year degree. I know you guys have like smaller programs there. Mm-hmm. So after 4 years, they should stop. They should get some work experience, and then they should go back and do other types of postgraduate study. I don't think it makes any sense for most kids who don't want to be in academics to have PhDs by the time they turn 25.
Yeah, I've got no problem with that, with what you're saying there either.
Yeah, I mean, there's already
also we undervalue the trades.
But I got to say that education in general, I mean, there's the problem that the 100 years ago problem, which is 100 years ago, being on the farm sucked and going to school was great. That's where all the information was. Now going to school sucks because all the information is in your phone and you hate sitting in class for 6 hours a day. And so I don't know how you fix education to make it as attractive as everything outside of education.
Oh, I know how to. Instead of there being a top-down, centralized approach to education made by bureaucrats in some central location, perhaps we should tailor the education to individual students, and we should separate students based on what actually works for them based on their own thing. We've also seen a study recently. In Australia, the school year goes from January to December. we've also seen that those students that are born later in the year underperform those students that are born earlier in the year because of cognitive development, etc. So there are all sorts of ways.
Because you're a little kid, like if you're born late in the year, then you're 6 months behind physically, and then you're more likely to be a wimp, be like bullied, not cool, and not a jock, and that whole thing makes it's miserable. So
everything that you're talking about is going to cost money. Everything that you're also talking about in terms of specifics dedicated directly to an individual kid, that's going to focus more on AI to figure that out, because we don't have the finances or the actual resources to do particular things that you're actually asking. So we're going to have to lean heavily on AI to do those particular things, which a lot of teachers and a lot of actual school systems are starting to gamify particular educational things to learn these things and to pick up and help out those kids and train them forward. So yes, there's a lot of stuff that we have to do that'll be tailor-made, particularly for a kid. But again, that's going to deal with funding and money, because people already argued and were fighting against the free community college, which you already saying that you wanted the trades. Where do people get the trades? From the community colleges and from the other smaller institute or smaller trade schools that are out there. And those are the things that are great. But also, we've got to also ourselves stop prioritizing money so heavily and saying that
How you going to not prioritize money?
Let me finish. Let me finish so you can understand. Let me finish so you can understand this idea that money is the only thing that you should focus on. Because right now, you said we have a shortage of trades. You know what else we have a shortage of? Teachers. Teachers, you can't focus on money. Hold on. Let me chat.
You are prioritizing.
Chat. Again.
Attack.
So if you focus so heavily on the financing, the teaching position doesn't pay much. If you focus so heavily on financing, the nursing position, which we are in dire need of, we're in shortage of nurses, that doesn't pay much. If you're so focused on money, the officer position it's not something that you want to go to. So our priority should be on the needs that we need as a society, and not, hey, if it doesn't pay, you shouldn't do it. So we do a lot of the damage to ourselves by what we prioritize as a collective.
To quote your favorite president, Joe Biden, if you think that there's not enough money for teachers and nurses and police officers, pay them more. That's the solution. Pay them more. But what you don't get to do is to say that you don't want to prioritize money, but you want to prioritize spending my money. Okay? All of the community should pay for it, not just the people at the top.
We've already established that the biggest investment that with the biggest payout or the payout at the end is education. So therefore, yes, it should be paid.
Talking about AI, my brother and I developed a 90210 type, soap opera high school show set 15 years in the future. And in the future, one kid has a slutty AI teacher who, when that kid meets certain performance goals, she helps him jerk off. And that's not for every kid, but that's a much cheaper way to get a kid educated than.
Sounds like a very crazy way to get educated.
The problem with your theory is that if you're doing it in California, it's going to be some non-binary, teacher with a rainbow flag that's.
But regardless, it's AI. AI teachers will end up being cheaper if done right than flesh and blood teachers.
We've already found out in other industries that machines are cheaper than the labor, because you don't have to pay the machines as much as you have to pay the labor. What do you think AI?
Yeah, it does. Well, I'm sorry I'm late today. It's great to see everybody. I'm going to be in and out the next couple months, probably till early or mid next year. But I will be trying to come on whenever I can. And my main closeout today is going to try to come in tomorrow to talk about smart cities. But, lots going on with Israel, asking Rafah to evacuate. I'm going to talk about my visit with Joe Biden in Wilmington, North Carolina, the president of the United States, and talking about lead and water. And, of course, lots of news about the hush money trials and things like that. At the end of the day, tomorrow, actually on Wednesday, in North Carolina, we're having the Smart Cities Conference, which is going to be talking about global leaders and everything they're doing with Internet of Things. It's really exciting. So I'm going to send information out to everybody on the Roku TV network to attend. On May 15th, we'll be streaming live my virtual fireside chat with John Chambers, former CEO and Cisco, chairman of Cisco, who'll be talking about AI in our future. He also has been an advisor to India and has some insight in terms of India's role in the economy. So it's great to see Shaquille Latimer. I was actually thinking about you the other day. You look great, and lots going on in the world. And also Dan Worthington, good to see you as well, everybody. And
you'll be pleased to know, Steve, that actually you've been the topic of some conversation that I've had, nothing to do with politics or finance, with a friend of mine over in Dubai. So I'll fill you in on that. I might call you later.
Okay. Well, I've been in and out, but I'll be back soon. It's just work. Still got to make a living, and 10 in the morning Eastern Standard Time is in the middle of a work day. So, and we've actually gone back to the office.
You don't have to make a living. You can always go into politics or finance.
No, but you got to make money.
You got to pay the bills. That's what a lot of folks are doing and everything.
Yeah.
And to your point, Shaquille, one of the things that I've seen in funding is that, unfortunately, a lot of times the first things that are cut, and I think that's what Jacoby was alluding to, are kind of the creative programs, but also the vocational programs. That's one of the first things that they wind up cutting is the vocational trade programs. And I think that is a shame, but I've seen that quite often throughout North Carolina, that one of the first things that they will cut will be like the welding programs, the brickmakings, and a number of the other fields that are needed professions.
But you're not going to get any disagreement from me. You're really not. I don't think that it's fair for schools to be underfunded. That's not fair and it's not right. And of course, that funding cannot be proportionate to how much their parents are earning, because that's not how society works in the first place. But what we have seen, and if I talk about the United States, what you have seen over many decades now has been a situation where schools have had a similar level of funding, but have not had similar levels of results. Now, some of that is down to, again, you might be very surprised, you and Jacoby, to hear me say this. Some of this is down to straight out racism. Some of that is down to the fact that blacks were held back. But if you take the race issue out of it and look at other poor areas, take a place like Little Rock, Arkansas, for example. What you see there, a predominantly white area, is that it's similar funding at the schools in that area to the more prestigious areas in Arkansas, and yet they do not get the results. So I think, when I say funding, I mean funding per student. So I think that it's not just a simple question of, okay, it's underfunded, let's just throw more money at it. You need to find out how those dollars are being used. We need to make sure that our government bureaucrats are actually accountable for the money that they're spending on our behalf.
No, I hear
So
what you're
also,
saying.
okay, here's another problem is that education with low pay and tough conditions attracts a lot of dumber people who make dumber decisions. If you look at the standardized test scores of people who go into education, they're lower than people who go into other fields. So when you have a bunch of dopes trying to run the schools, you're going to get bad results.
But Rick, that's my whole point, right? Look, you're a high IQ person, okay? You're part of Mega. I'm a Mensa member. Look, you would know as well as I do that going through school was boring. It was horrible. I hated going through school because I was bored shitless all the time. Okay, but there are certain things that I just could not do. There's certain things I couldn't do. It wasn't normally academic wise. Now, I know that there's a heap of kids that I went to school to, because I went to some public schools and some private schools. When I went to public schools, normally I was chasing a girl. What I found was there was a heap of kids that were at that school who did not want to be there. They didn't like the maths, and I'd try to help them and tutor them and stuff, and they just didn't want to be there. They didn't want to pick it up. But if I asked them something to do with mechanics or, something like that, they were amazing at it.
Yeah.
Okay, they could very easily look at me and say, I'm a dumbass, right? If I go and hang out with farmers, they're going to say I'm an idiot, right? Because I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to those fields. Those are the kids that are being left behind because of this insistence by society that education must be forced upon them.
I don't disagree.
I disagree. I don't think you say, okay, well, that kid who's a farmer, yes, they're brilliant on the farm, so therefore they should not have to go to school or become educated. I disagree with that.
Well, Jacoby, what we have seen for 30 years is those kids
why I disagree.
have behavioral problems.
Can I explain to you why I disagree? I disagree with that because as we've gone back and forth, we all have on this, talking about financial literacy, right? Financial literacy is supposedly something important. But if that farmer kid doesn't even want to learn math, but yes, he's great on the farm, he doesn't have to be educated, he's still going to fall behind on financial literacy. I think we have to get back to trying to reach kids where the kids are. Because right now, for example,
on the financial literacy front, I'm going to the economic show. So
even those farmers and mechanics kids who just you're already wanting to give up on, they can offer something to society. Just as Dan and I were going back and forth, because Dan, I completely agree. Excellence should be the focus. Excellent. They should be the greatest mechanic, greatest farmer, whatever. If they are, and they are educated, they can become entrepreneurs. They need that educational background, or at least basis, to understand reading, writing, and understand they're not getting taken advantage of on a legal bill and so on and so forth. So they've got to have some type of basis there. So we've got to learn to reach kids and teach kids in a different way, and say this kid who's a farmer, yes, they're brilliant on the farm, should be able to graduate high school. We don't have to force them to community college or anything. Let them go to high school, finish out high school, so they have some options.
But the things like metal shop, wood shop, home ec, stuff like that, all that, whether you go into a trade or not, have my being exposed to wood and metal shop help just me be a good, like in later life, like realizing that I can work with materials. And
I was just going to say,
part of me is like a good citizen and a good, I don't know, in a relationship.
About being a good citizen.
What you're talking about is exactly why they need to be in school. Because what schools, as Mark pointed out, schools keep getting chopped in funding. Yeah. If we had that funding for the shop class that used to be there, if we had the funding for these other classes, because it offers you experiences in safe environments, that's the importance of a school. If we had these opportunities for these kids to, well, you know, I like art now because, hey, I got to go and sculpt in class and deal with clay. Or, hey, I like theater because, hey, I tried it for the first time because my school can offer that to me. So offering these extra classes and safe spaces for these individuals to try these things like metalwork, some type of shop class to be able to build something. So learning how to sew, that's an essential skill. So, I mean, learning these things and having that in a safe school environment, that is what we want, because that kid can be in school learning these things. Because imagine a mechanic in school learning the whole thermodynamics now. Because, hey,
and also like part of shop and home ec is learning how to program the devices that help you do this stuff. Like if you're a farmer right now, you have to be really good at working at programming type stuff, because your thresher and your tractor and all your John Deere equipment requires programming skills to optimize.
Like I said, it's been a fascinating conversation. I know we're winding down because they got economics is still going on right now and everything. But like I said, I'm not all that opposed to certain kinds of focus schools as well. As a matter of fact, just yesterday I was out at Nasher, which is a museum here in the area, and they actually had a St. Sia Academy, which is very African-centric kind of school. But then I know that there are Christian schools and there are Jewish schools and even some Asian schools. So I think that those are perfectly all right as well, if that's going to help those.
You got to watch out for some of the Christian schools' agendas, depending on that. If they're trying to strip away anything that they find uncomfortable, or then that whole homeschool Christian school thing, you know, the people need, you know, you need to teach them math and science and coding.
You have to teach them basic skills, because even if you're doing a focus school, because like I said, the woman that runs, and she actually does a show here on the network, St. Sia Academy, and there are some people that may not agree with everything that she says, but she talks about history from an African standpoint and some of the African parts of history that the public school doesn't teach, but she also makes sure that they learn basic reading, basic writing, and basic kind of skills as well. So even if you are part of a focus school, I think that you need to have some of those basic kind of qualities being taught as well. And I will say that that's what Mama Noe Noni does with her school, the St. Zia Academy, and they have a show here on the network. It's actually after our world politics. So she's literally what comes on after us on Tuesday and everything. So definitely that is a show, but I get what she's doing. She's trying to teach people to be proud of their heritage, but also some of the basic skills as well.
Yep. All right. I will see you over at another show.
Sounds good.